In this video, we're going to learn how to use Edit by Curve in Fusion 360 Forms. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video, we're going to dive into the Edit by Curve tool inside of a Fusion 360 form. Once again, we're going to get started by creating a new form. I think it's great practice to always start with a new document when you're playing with some of these tools. That way you go through the process of creating a new form body, playing around with it, shaping it, and just getting comfortable with the tools. So we're going to start by creating a plane. We're going to select the top plane, and I'm going to start at the origin and simply draw out a box that's 2 by 2. I'm going to add symmetry, selecting mirror, and notice that we can select length and width. In this case, we're only going to use length, and we'll say OK. I'm going to box select everything, go to Modify, Edit Form, and from the right, I'm going to bring this up a little bit and rotate it. And then I'm going to make sure that I go into Box Display mode. That's Alt and 1, or you can go into your selection options and select Box Display. It's not going to look any different at this point, but I want to begin by modifying this using Edit Form. I'm going to increase the angle between these two, and if we go back and forth between Smooth and Box Display, you can see that we're getting a change. While that edge is still selected, I'm going to insert an edge, going both, and saying OK. Now what I've done is I've simply divided this face up. Now there is a point to what we're doing. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to begin adding to this shape. And the reason that I want to do this is because we're going to create sort of a general hood shape. And we're going to do this because I want to talk about the Edit by Curve tool, but we need a little bit of a geometry first. So we'll double click this edge, go to Modify, Edit Form, I'm going to go to a top view, hold down the Alt key, going to begin dragging this back, zoom out a little bit, hold down Alt again, drag it back once more. I'm going to double click this front edge, go to a side view, and I'm going to hold down Alt and bring this down. Alt one more time, bring this down a little bit here, and we'll go one more time, bring it here. Now when I go back and forth between Smooth and Box Display, you can see what we've done here. I want to take this edge, I'm going to double click it, and just simply bring it up a little bit. And this one here as well, bring that up, Alt 3. You can see that we have a nice smooth shape, Alt and 1, we go back to Box Display. So again, very generic sort of hood shape that we can work with. Now let's talk about what Edit by Curve actually is. Now at this point, we've been using Edit Form for pretty much everything. We're moving vertices around, we're moving faces, we're moving edges, and we're using that tool to also extrude to help us create new geometry. But Edit by Curve is another great way that we can manipulate the form body. I'm going to select Edit by Curve, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to select a T-spline edge. Note with this tool, we can't select vertices or faces, we have to select edges. I'm going to double click this entire edge here, and you'll notice that this instantly changes the way that this face looks. Now the reason this happens is because by default, the degree is 3. And when we think about this, let's go to a right-hand view and let's talk about what this degree value is. So this value right now is 3, and if we take a look at what we have on the screen, we've got the start and the end control points, and then we've got 2 in the middle, leaving us 1, 2, and 3 straight sections between. Now those straight sections are the degree of this Bezier curve. Now don't worry too much about these definitions, but just note that if we increase this number, let's say to 5, we can manually enter that value, what we now have is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 straight sections. The more, in this case, vertices or control points that we have, the higher the resolution of the spline, but that also increases the complexity of controlling it. So if we decrease this back down to, let's say, 3, you'll notice because we have so many more divisions of this curve here that the geometry is kind of getting bunched and pinched together. So there is going to be a limit to the effectiveness of this and the values that you choose. If I select a control point, we're going to go to this curve control points, and if I select one, I now get this manipulator that allows me to move it around. Just like with the manipulator in Edit Form, we can now move in a single direction, or we can move in plane, or we can move around in 3D. Note that we do have a planar curve option, and when we use that, it only will give us two directions. So from a right-hand view, using the planar curve option, I'm going to begin moving this around. You can see that I really don't have great control over this because I have so many face divisions here. So I really need to increase the degree of this, and then I can select the control points and I can begin to manipulate this. Now, you'll notice that they kind of go up and down and they bounce around. And part of this is because what we're doing is we're either using a surface point or a control point. Now, we're looking at this right now in box display mode. If I go to smooth display mode, you'll notice that these points are above, but we're manipulating surface points. If we use the control point option, then what we're doing is we're creating a curve that now is manipulating those box points underneath. So you'll notice that it's kind of hard to get a result that makes sense and that works for us. And this is one of those situations where edit by curve is really not a good fit. If we hit cancel, we have Control Z to undo. Let's go ahead and undo that back to our original shape. We have much better control using our manual methodology, allowing us to control that curve. So when does it make sense for us to use something like edit curve? Well, let's go ahead and make a simple example. I'm just going to create a box form. Let's go ahead and just increase its size a little bit. And now let's go to modify edit by curve. I'm going to select two edges. Now these two edges, you'll notice, go across the entire face here. We have a degree 3. I'm looking at a planar curve, and we're looking at surface points. Now, if I use my control points on the curve, I can select multiples, I can move this around, and I can really get a good transition for these two edges. So my suggestion or my recommendation is when you're using this edit by curve tool, I would strongly suggest that the degree that you're using is at least one more than the number of edges you're trying to control. So in this case, if, for example, we try to carry on across this edge, I would want to have at least a degree 4 curve when I'm trying to control the shape. So now we can select the curve control points. Remember that we do have curvature continuity, even though the spline or this curve that we're creating doesn't look like it, the surface itself still has curvature continuity. But now I can use these control points and I can begin manipulating the shape as desired. Keep in mind that it's not a hard and fast rule that you have to have 1 degree more than the number of edges you're trying to control. We could certainly have 5 here and get really good control over this edge. But I find that if you have a larger number of edges than the number of degrees in that Bezier curve, it starts to get extremely troublesome or tricky for you to control that geometry. There is, of course, several options. You can use edge length distribution or uniform distribution. Again, you can use planar curves if you want to keep it in 2 dimensions. For example, let's go ahead and just use this edge length. If I'm moving this around, you can see that the control is still similar, but the way in which the distribution of the points and how it's modifying the underlying geometry changes a bit. If we change this back to uniform, you can see it's trying to keep an equal distance between these as best as possible, but edge length distribution helps tighten up the control points when we have a tighter radius of curvature. So as we're looking at this, that is a good option for something, again, where we're looking at the number of edges that we're trying to control is at least 1 smaller than the number of control vertices on that Bezier curve that we're trying to use. It's not a one-size-fits-all tool. You're going to have a lot more control using something like edit form, and edit by curve is not going to give you a great result when you have a large number of divisions. That's not to say that it doesn't work. It's possible to make it work. You can see in the tooltip on the screen that they have a large number of divisions. There's 6 across that face, and their preview only has a Bezier curve with a degree of 3. They only have the 2 intermediate control points in the start and the end. So just keep in mind when you're playing around with this tool, try it out on a couple different designs. Make a new face, make a new primitive shape, whether it's a box or a cylinder, and play around with the tool just to see how it works. It can work great on some designs and it can be a really horrible choice on others. It really just kind of depends on what you are trying to do. If If you have any questions about this tool, please let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.